I'm Al Moritz, A.F. Moritz, and I'm really pleased and delighted to be able to be part of Thin Air, the online 2020 Winnipeg Writers Festival. And I'm really happy to be, people are usually vanishing into thin air, but I get to be appearing in thin air or on thin air. So I'm really happy about that. I'm going to do two events for the festival. This one is going to be a reading, and elsewhere they'll also post a little talk by me. And they're both going to be premised on or based on my book, As Far As You Know. That's the title of it, As Far As You Know. And it was published by Anansi in April, so it's just a brand new book. And so I'm very pleased with it, and I'm very happy to have this chance to read from it. So I think I'm going to read, I believe I've got 10 poems selected here. Most of them are fairly short, so the reading shouldn't be too long. And I'll just give a little bit of commentary about the book and so on. But the first thing I'll do is just read the first poem. And so the first poem, I'm going to put on my glasses so I can be sure I can see. Nice reflections, eh? And, they sort of magnify things for me a bit. And so this first poem is called A Book Travels. And it's sort of about any book, and so it's about this book. A book travels. A book travels through the world, a closed coffer, a box of jewels, or a tiny casket in which someone carries in her lap the body, the ash of the best beloved. If it opens, the sun rises, a paper star springing from the pages of a child's pop-up book, enclosing the solar fire as it used to burn in Trebizond. It gleams over a world of farms and forests. The face of the reader leans closer. Enormous sunflower above the sun, far above the plain of people no larger than the letters in a book. From dawn to sunset and on through night, it turns following its birth. So that's a poem about how a book is really a part of nature, the grandest part, and nature is part of a book, the grandest part. And you might notice that it uses the sunflower. I'm using the sunflower all the time because I love sunflowers and they were part of my childhood and they continue part of my life. But they also connected when I was reading William Blake, about the age of 12, starting to read him, with his famous poem, O Sunflower. O sunflower, weary of time that countest the steps of the sun, seeking after the sweet golden clime where the traveler's journey is done, where the youth find a way with desire, and the pale virgin, whiter than snow, arise from their graves and aspire where my sunflower seekest to go. So there the sunflower pines and aspires for and in a supernal realm, a hidden realm, a realm within a Blakean portal. And in my case, I take the same idea, but I try to make sure that you see that the sunflower's strange, hidden, magnificent world is the plain earth. The sunflower becomes the face of the reader, and the reader looks down to the book in her lap. And because she's looking down towards the earth and through the book into the earth. And that's an image of my opinion of literature, or at least of poetry. So, as far as you know, is arranged into 7 groups of poems with their own titles. The first group of poems is called Terrorism, and it is actually one long poem. And the second group of poems, the first is really a group, is called Poetry. And I put those back to back because the 2 words and the 2 facts sort of give the 2 sides of life. Poetry, the wholeness and the beauty of life. Terrorism, our tendency to see realistically that everything is awful, and to make it so. So I'm going to just stay with the short poems that begin in the second section, poetry, and called Poetry. And I'm just going to do mainly 4 or 5 poems from that section, second section, Poetry, 4 poems from the third section called Childhood Friends, and just finish up with 1 poem, which is called The One Who Answers the Call. So the next poem I want to read comes right after A Book of Travels, and it's a little bit more of an eggheady poem. And it's called A Throw of the Dice. And its title comes, and its challenge comes from the great, great poem by Stéphane Mallarmé, Un coup de dé n'abolira jamais le hasard. A throw of the dice will never abolish chance. That's the title of the poem, and that's sort of the major through line of it. So my poem is A Throw of the Dice. A throw of the dice will never abolish chance, but it does. You make your play and there it lies. The 6, you lose. You lose this time forever. Chance is gone, replaced by fate, your destiny of stone. But you can pick them up again, those bones. Unabolished chance makes its return. A phoenix from ashes, a mummy from the tomb, soaring above, striking terror all through what had obliterated it. Take courage, throw. You duck your head in prayer. For now, this while, on the verge, there exists even luck. Good luck, bad luck, some kind of knack for attracting disaster or averting it. Now you've unfrozen, the cubes roll again, and this time 7 spots or 12, you win. And everything's back at rest. Everything always comes back to rest in fortune or despair. The way it is now, the only way things are. How can this deep freeze and close and ever come to sprout freedom and fear? You are the only ice, the only stake, the only dice. Every throw was one throw, or it still is. In the closed or open arbor, you are the mirror or the window. This poem is Troubadour. The troubadour is the wandering poet and singer and performer of poetry. And here, the troubadour meditates on his relationship to his poetry, that it is in some sense immortal, and he is mortal. Troubadour. Better if I'd been a wandering song, and now were its memory. Words that mixed once in the clear scent of the river, dissolved and went along, a cooler freshness in the current. The story of the disaster, of some great knight and lady imprisoned in illusion. The rhymes falling like rain, like glistening darts and lusters of the dust or snow in the sun of summer or winter. Better if I had been the ballad and now were the memory of it. How good it was, now utterly forgotten. No knowledge remains except that it was perfect. Beauty and pain was perfect pleasure. Better, no singer of it ever existed, and so no stumbling singer now survives with folds of neck sagging to the ground, its witness and its refutation. This poem is called How You Love, How You Think. It's one of several poems in the book that is in the stepped form of the classic modernists. So if you looked at it, it might look like a poem from the 1920s or 30s by Ezra Pound or Hilda Doolittle or E.E. Cummings, or a poem from the 60s or 70s by Octavio Paz. Octavio Paz, the supremely great poet from Mexico, is a real saint of my devotion, and he was my more particular model for these poems. This one is called How You Love, How You Think. The title itself, I try to make a poem to converge those two phrases, conveys or rests upon my feeling that true thinking is love, and love is always thinking. And other kinds of so-called thinking, such as technical thinking, rationalistic thinking, technological and scientific thinking, do not really deserve the honorific title of intelligence. How you love, how you think. Where are the birds, unseen, gabbling and astir in leaves that hang unmoving, here where the wind is dead, a body gone into the blaze of air vibrating? Then eruption. The birds come gliding from their hidden places, down slides of air, to the fountain's pool, to play there, to drink, to live, to bathe and repair, feathers for flight. Then night comes, the garden now gray, a concert of grays, of bodies given back to the dissolving of the limits, the body's vague loom that was invisible in the clarity of the cut stone of noon. The sun has given way to 3,000 suns, the power of the visible, too far off to warm you. How you love the fear of death and sorrow of the dead in the night garden. How you think of them in peace and feel a companion in the night garden. Everlasting memory, a hand on your shoulder that is a breath of the breathless stillness. You breathe, I wish this night would never end. Where are the birds? They're somewhere here, black engravings on black slate. 3 or 4 bodies barely breathing along a branch, barely made out, its tree lost in the black no place, in the mind imagining. 3 or 4 children sunk together, apart in the intense comfort of sleep. The next poem I'll read is kind of towards the middle of the section poetry, and it's the title poem of the book, called As Far As You Know. And, well, let me read it, and then maybe I'll give a small commentary on it. As far as you know. When you last saw me, I was waiting. And now that you will never see me again, for all you know, I still am. The time it turned out, was the last time. I was sitting, staring across the top edge of the book into something just above and past the poem you couldn't see there on the page between us. Or I was walking. Many times you saw me walking, and I can't know if once when you glimpsed me far away in the park, too far away to hail, and you thought you'd tell me later. It would be fun to laugh over that almost meeting in one of the places that are ours. Was the last time. Maybe I was lying, suspiciously tired seeming, my eyes to the ceiling. When you last saw me, I was waiting, like you, for us to meet. And now, I still am, as far as you know. I'll just let that one speak for itself. The last poem I'll read from the section Poetry is called High Windows. And this is a little different sort of poem from those. Well, I guess they're all different from each other. But this one is a voice poem, a dramatic monologue, we'd say, if we were referring back to the inventors of that form for the modern world, Tennyson and Robert Browning. So this is in the voice of a homeless man who's been given a poor, cheap job for temporarily. High windows. This is the job that finally they gave me in spring and autumn, to sweep up the bodies of finches around the bases of the crystal windowed towers. When I used to sleep on the streets, it was similar. One of us died, the body would be picked up, but as long as we lived, never. It was as though there were someone somewhere who said, let them live, let them be, always let them alone. Let us have them with us as they are, forever. So strange it was and seemed at first. One of us disappeared, no trace, or just the filthy, crumpled bag of stuff left in a corner. But where was she? Until it ceased to appear. So often it happened, a wonder. Seasonal work, a job for a while, to search the long planters and bases of the walls for birds who break against windows in the times of migration, unable to see the hardness in the shining image of the new, more perfect world's openness. In the future, there are people who will have to imagine what world these words of mine are living in. Imagine it from their day, in which there is no longer the knowledge of what were towers. The third section, the one right after the one called Poetry, is called Childhood Friends, and it begins with a reminiscence of the poet's father, who was a biologist and a naturalist and just an altogether outdoorsy person who knew the name of every plant and animal and mushroom and insect you could possibly come across. Names of birds. Awake at dawn, recalling my father, crying, unable to go to sleep again, and soon the first bird sings. Despair when the first bird sings and the first light comes and you haven't slept. I curse myself. The many-noted melody is its signature, but I can't read its name. My father knew the name of every bird, every tree, bush, and grass they played in, every seed, bug, and worm they ate, their friend. I have lived to an age far past what he received, and I know nothing. Father, where are you? So I can ask you and have you give me the names. I always thought I'd take the time later to learn them from you. A scientist, he used to say, names are only for people. Now I see birds have names and he knew them, not just the nomenclature of kinds, the name of each one, a strange sort of word that exists only an instant when the bird answers a man who whistles to it and then goes silent, hoping to hear him again. Now I return to another poem, very brief, but still one that is sort of in the more philosophical or visionary vein, and it's called Before Definition. It's kind of about the relationship of poetry to silence, the relationship of what is original and what comes later and is built upon it, and always, in a sense, has to return to it, or is automatically, whether it wants to or not, returning to it by being living upon and around it. Before definition. First in the mind there should be no words. Let poetry have a place before definition, hammered signs, inanities, greetings, those loves, those sweetnesses congealed. A place without coprophilia of a slang lost to honor and humor. A space without the knowledge that kills all the dandelions, their weeds, their clones, in the flat buzzing corral that makes the sun remorseless. Mind, place of no words, while the words are growing invisible in the depth and dream of sleep. Mind, space for the turning of a corner into the unexpected world. The expanse before it has said its prayer to you, its commandment, its begging. Decide. In other words, in my conception, silence and everything that it might symbolize, the great all, the all-mothering void, and so forth, is not just an amorphous substratum, but is itself a being, a creature, a person, which in its own way, which is not words and concepts, but corresponds to them in somehow, does say things to us. Silence and speech may be opposed, but they're not totally opposed. They're in cooperation too. Silence demands speech. Speech demands to return to silence. Childhood friend, remembering a girlfriend of 5 years old when we were both 5. Or maybe 4. Pretty early, way back at the dawn of memory. Childhood friend. I am condemned now to my idea of you, but forever and forever you call me out. Albert, you call, at the time of dawns, reaching up into the treetops. Come out and play, and I leap to your girl's voice, the adult still sleeping. And often too, I am the first to get up and sneak away, and I am the one who calls at your door, a whispered shout, afraid to wake your mother and father, and you're asleep soon, you come down. How my heart sings even today that it's you who come down for me. We'll go out into the light that clothes itself in dew sparkling across lawns, trees, and flower beds. Our old world again. We'll run, clothes all askew as usual, with children no one has dressed. And running, we'll tear off those shorts and shirts the moment we get past the blackberry brambles and into the woods and laugh over our different bodies and inform each other all about them solemnly. There is our hut of leaves some bushes wove. There's the blackbird and the garter snake, goldfinch and grasshopper, and the huge black and gold sun in shadow, the garden spider. There's the carp still in the reeds. Yes, you called me out, you who have receded into womanhood and godhood, hidden behind the noon and the starry night sky, somewhere over the curvature of earth. And my wondering, the doubt, if you ever were, or were a dream, if any God was in you, and if you grew, once I no longer saw you, into an anxious occupation by the law that wills a death for the trees and the birds, but 2 deaths for each of us, woman and man. But you called me out. And I'll conclude my reading with the poem, which I'll just leave mysterious. The Stag. Childhood Friend is a joyous poem. In a way, I think this poem is joyous too. And though strange, in a strange, oblique kind of way, it has everything to do with the poem earlier in this section that I read called Before Definition. So if the guy who is talking says he's dead, how can that be? You might think about what that means. The Stag. As I stood looking at the head of the great stag my hounds had torn apart, I saw that it was me, and I was dead. They'd torn every part of it. The fur was gluey, matted, and brown where it had bled. The eye that looked at me, mild and sorrowful, was my eye, the forest's eye, in the bloodless head. It had once been given me to see everything and to run through every entrail of the naked wood. My pack that had terrified the wood, where had it gone? All was quiet. I was dead. Well, thanks, everybody. That's a little taste from As Far As You Know. And as I said, I put a coda on it, which is one poem from very near the end. So this is my concluding poem. It's a little longer than The Stag, but not much. And it's called The Spot. And you'll see at the third line, I used that the man on the spot has stopped. Not the first time. I will have used the little trick that the word spot and the word stop are the same if the letters rearranged so much. All right, The Spot. From my homelessness, I see my land, as a man in a place sees it, small and vast, from his one spot. It may be where he's stopped to pant in the infinite dryness of the sun on the hard road, or the spot on the road where he happens to be now as he walks, passing through. From it, he sees the people all around him who live in the place. And he sees the people who once lived here in the birds, animals, flowers, crops, and fountains. And he carries them, the stories of the place, in its moment now. Streams flowing into a lake, roads coming into a town. The place is his home. What he thinks about it is his poem, his world of grief tinged with happiness, or happiness full of mourning, that he makes as he moves forward and looks out at it far around him from his homelessness, his spot. So thank you, everybody. Good night.